This is a symposium about building brands and using digital marketing strategies to help create them. How many of you heard of Kelly Clarkson, Sia, Melanie Martinez? Just like show of hands. Yeah, pretty much everybody, awesome. So first up, we're gonna explore how the music industry harnesses the power of social media to transform emerging talent to powerhouse stars. We'll delve into the creation of unique brand identities and examine innovative marketing strategies that help these artists be elevated. This is especially crucial in today's landscape where streaming plays a really big part in building artists' brands and raising awareness for their success. We're gonna uncover the strategies for shaping their future in music and how you can use the same strategies to build your own brand. And now we're gonna talk about our keynote speaker. So, recognized by Billboard magazine as one of the top women executives, Nina has spent 25 years shaping careers of platinum selling and emerging artists on major record labels, and her most recent work in this industry was in New York as the SVP and Head of Marketing at Atlantic Records. Her experience spans artist development, brand building, and creating direct-to-fan relationships in the ever-evolving music industry. While at Atlantic Records, Nina oversaw over 100 artists on the label's pop rock roster while working closely on collaborative plans with all internal development and external management teams. Working closely with artists, she oversaw creative development and intricate campaigns for artists like Kelly Clarkson, Janelle Monáe, Melanie Martinez, and Death Cab for Cutie, to the many developing artists such as Gail, Jax, and Matt Mason. Currently, Nina is a marketing consultant and professor at Berklee College of Music. Let's give a warm welcome to our keynote, Nina Webb.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us. I know Halloween night is a lot, and I'm very impressed with how put together you guys are. So thank you for joining us this morning. Today, I would like you to actually think differently about social media than how you usually think about it on an everyday basis. It wasn't that long ago when artists and brands and fans were at a big distance from each other. Artists were counting on press releases, interviews that the journalists could edit and change differently, videos that they were dependent on broadcast channels to decide if they wanted to play it or not. There was not a direct communication between the artist, brand, and fan, and that is something that you probably never experienced. It was fans would only connect if they were at a show or they had a meetup or something locally. So I think it's kind of, to start talking about social media, it's actually really important to start thinking about like what it was before, because what it is now is this connection directly with the fans and people who are like-minded. Artists are able to send exactly the messages they want in their own voice. They're able to share their music, their creative, their demos, their remixes, what they believe in, what their point of view is, directly to the fan base. And that's incredibly powerful because nobody's going to change the way that they want their message to be heard. So I think it's important to just kind of think about that because that wasn't ever the case. So for me, it started when I was 10 years old. Yes, this is a bit of an embarrassing photo. This is a sign of the youngest of three who cut my own hair. But I had a half-brother named Jeff who was a tour manager for these bands. And we would go and see him in Portland, Maine at these arenas. And we didn't really know these artists. I mean, Journey, that's a big one, right? So I was just mesmerized by the audience, by the fans. We would see these like normal looking men usually backstage eating dinner and talking, and then they got on stage and they had changed. They had transformed into these stars. But the fans I was mostly connected with and watching them, people were having like this very emotional moment, connecting with each other, connecting with the artists, having the best night of their life. And for me, those moments really shaped my whole career, because that moment of a fan to artist connection, how did they get there? Like, how did they become that loyal to buy a shirt, go see the tour, spend the money? those are the connections that I became really obsessed with, and that led me down the road to marketing. So I have spent, thank you very much for the introduction. I have spent 25 years, which is a little painful to say because that feels really old, in the music industry, in the trenches with artists. I didn't think I originally wanted to be in the music industry, and this goes into your personal brand. So for me, I was like, no, I'm gonna do the advertising agency. It's like it seems much safer and easier, which I, by the way, still love. But my lifestyle and my passion and my brand, I was seeing shows 5 nights a week. I was always in Boston at these small dive clubs, seeing artists, that energy of a live performance, the connecting with people that were similar to me was something that I just became obsessed with. So at the end of the day, my brand turned into, I should be working with artists. I should be working with people who make that connection. So I have spent a long time working with them. I worked with platinum artists, but majority of the artists were ones who were just developing, figuring out what their band name was gonna be. They don't have a brand. They don't have a fan. They're creating this from scratch. We're creating the photo shoots, the video shoots, what tours they should be going on, how are they performing live, how are people connecting. I would be in the audience up by the mosh pit area. How did you know about them? How did you hear about them? Who else do you like? I'd be doing my own little casual research while walking through the audience. So I think that those are the elements of what I love the most. When they get bigger, the artists get larger, it's managing their brand, right? But at the beginning, you're really creating a brand. So what is it that makes these artists, and many, of course, there's hundreds more, maybe less than hundreds actually, who are really making that impact. But what is it that really makes them connect with their fans? So I think the first thing I want to talk about, and I appreciate that you guys are here, because the music industry is, understanding and learning from the music industry is vital no matter what industry you're going in. Because the music industry is first and foremost the biggest industry to get hit by consumer behavior, disruptions in technology, that any other industry will follow that. So if you follow what's happened with music, with Napster coming out, switching into iTunes, streaming services, it changes the way that consumers discover music. Right now, Gen Z has broken the marketing model in the funnel of path to purchase. It's no longer a clean funnel, it's a loop, right? So these are all lessons that you can learn from the music industry, and also building a brand. If you're dealing with an artist, which is ever changing, they're as good as their art, right? And you're dealing with a consumer base that is incredibly finicky, has a lot of demands, and also change the way they feel often. And you have technology disruptions. I feel like if you can market and understand the music industry, you can do anything else. At the end of the day, I would love an inanimate object that I can know exactly where it's going to be in a couple of weeks, how it's going to look, how it's going to act, and making sure we're consistent with our messaging, which is probably a lot of what you've learned in school, is that consistency with this object. Okay, let's look at €1. Let's look at €2. This is the music industry. It's always changing. The plan's always changing. Your marketing's always changing. They release music that is different than what they released before. That consumer base, that audience is changing. So it's just the speed of the industry is really intense. If you're able to follow it and put your business hat on as opposed to your fan hat, you can see how these changes happen. So I think that the music industry it's important to follow regardless. Also the impact of music, right? It's about to surpass 100 billion in 2024. I mean, all these venture capitalists are all over the music industry right now trying to figure out how to get in. It's an incredibly powerful industry. 600 million used music streaming, especially 60% between 16 to 24 and 25 to 34. So the audience is there, the consumers are there. And the influence is there, right? Music is highly influential. Artists are highly influential. That is the hardest thing to get. The other part is now you have a powerful music industry, and then you have social media. So with social media, obviously the power of social media, you guys have lived it every day, but this has not always been the case. So try to remember the positives. There's a lot of, double-edged sword with social media. Here's the positives, right? You can communicate your brand. You can build your brand from your voice piece. That's incredibly powerful. You can make a change. You can connect with your audience. You connect with the fan base. You immediately find out the metrics, right? You see if people like it. Do they share it? Are they talking about it? Are they engaged in it? So just with these 3 platforms, which I picked because they're the most relevant for Gen Z, you have 6 billion active users, right? I don't know if they're all unique. They're probably crossing over, but still, it's a huge number. So let's see how do we build an artist brand from the music industry? And I'm sure in class you're learning about building a brand. So for me, I feel like there's a lot of focus about what to do. Like, okay, we need content, we need some advertising, we need maybe influencers, we need, this list of things. But I think what is often most rushed is exactly who the brand is, if it's great, does it help serve a purpose, not always with music, right? But is it gonna connect? But first and foremost is making sure you have a great brand. And you spend the time really knowing the brand before you do step 1. You also spend the time really knowing your audience. What's their behavior? Who else are they liking? All of those elements are really important before you do anything to move forward with building it, right? So we've had a lot of lessons with brands. There's a ton of examples, but I'm going to show you one of my favorite. That's skipping this. One of my favorite is Chapel Roan, which we'll talk about. But this part right here is storytelling. So the building a brand is ultimately you're building a story. What is their story, right? So you first find out what the story is of the artist. And you really find out. People rush this all the time. What makes them different? Everybody's learned the SWOT, right? What's the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats? Same thing with artists. Okay, maybe not feeling as formal, but same type of thing. What are their strengths? Are they great vocalists? Are they a songwriter? Do they produce? Are they an amazing instrumentalist? Are they multi-instrumentalists? Are they charismatic? Are they not charismatic? Are they not that great as a vocalist? Believe me, there's plenty of artists out there that their strength is not pure, clear vocals. Right? So you want to be really clear about what the strengths and opportunities and what is your story that you're telling. So be a trusted, for your role too, is you have to be a trusted partner. So if you're working with artists or a brand, at the end of the day, you're trusted with their voice. You are their voice. You're supposed to be the closest person to understand exactly who they want to be, what they believe in, and especially who they don't. At the end of the day, you're working with their brand, not yours. This happens often. People will try to be who they think they should be, or you should try to do this, and you should, be this type of artist, or this type of personality, or this type of brand. This is their world, and at the end of the day, if you're working with artists, as I was, I took that responsibility very seriously. I am making sure I fully understand and checking in with them. I will never release anything creatively they have not approved. It is not my brand. It is their brand. And at the end of the day, I feel like we're all going to be judged. So make sure you're being judged on exactly who you are and be consistent. Anybody know who this is? Anybody? Yeah. Yeah, this is Chapel Roan. Maybe you don't recognize her at this point, but this is who she was at the beginning, right? Figuring out who her brand was. This is what she was thinking. She was singing melancholy music. Of course, her vocals were incredible, but she was very subdued and simple with her look. And then we have the new Chapel Roan. What I love about this example, and again, this is putting your business hat on. This is not about whether you personally like an artist or not. That's not what this is about. This is about making sure that, A, for artists, it takes time. It takes time. They're under a microscope. It takes time. They're going to have to breathe and see who they are and see who they evolve into. But what I love about this, and this grid happens too late, what I'd like to see it is in 2020 or 2019, is when the photos from before is where she started. But the minute she started figuring out who she was, and yes, she was dropped by the label, she lost her team, she was figuring out if she should just give it all up, and then she opened her world up to being exactly who she really feels like she was. She made music to relate to it. She created this persona and fell in love with the drag queen community. And she is now this powerhouse artist. But regardless, it starts with the brand, right? So you can't start building one until you make sure you really know what it is. And I think once she figured out who she was, leaned into that, made amazing music that represented it, it took off. So step 2. So once you know your brand or the artist brand, and this is personal too, all of these steps go exactly the way it should for your personal brand. Your aha moment, mine was apparently at 10, but I didn't know that until later, that it started that young, that you've probably already had moments that you need to make sure you're connecting with and saying, like, is this really on brand? This is what you've been gravitating to. Once you have that for building a brand, you really create a vision board, right? You create a vision board even if you don't share it necessarily. You create a vision board of things that are connected to how you feel. The colors for artists and brands is the logo. It's basically your North Star. This is where you're going. Because what happens with social media all the time and across the board with marketing, there's so many pieces of the puzzle and it's so relentless with keeping up with content and all the speed and making sure, like, should I be following this trend? Should I be doing this? At the end of the day, you go exactly to who you are. Is it on brand? You don't do it if it's not on brand, right? You don't do it if it doesn't feel right, just because other people are. So you build your vision board to make sure that you're staying focused in your goal of who you're reaching. And so we do that all the time because the speed that it comes in on, if a song is taking off, all of the requests are coming in, certain influencers, who do I have? Who should I get for micro-influencer? It's all on brand. You don't have to change who you are to feed the beast of all of these platforms. Here's an example. I worked with Paramore, who I adore, and they came in with this incredible album called This Is Why, and this was an example of what we did. So it was coming out of the pandemic. This album was about the fear of coming out of a pandemic, the fear of connecting with people socially again, and what they felt that the description, and this is really what we did, the description of this album was the idea of feeling observed, separated. It's like a painting that people are standing too close to. They felt this anxiety about it, right? So what we did for this album campaign is we created a vision board. We created, like, what's the energy are they feeling? And by the way, this happens if the recording of the music. So specifically on the artist side, this is like something that artists should be paying attention to while they're writing the music, while they're producing it, while they're finishing it up. How does it make them feel? What is the world that they see around them? So for this album, these are specific things that they were representing in this album. And so what we did as following it through was you obviously spent a lot of time with the music. Music has to be great. You find the vision board. You go, this is what they're representing. So how do we make sure we are staying on brand globally? Because everything's global. Everything is global, right? So globally, how do we make sure that we're following through? And this also is your guideline for content, because content is, it's just never ending. You always have to create. You find your guideline. So this is the process we went through for making a vision board for the band, for This Is Why. And then I'll show you some of the execution. So then the step 3 is, once you do the vision board, you know your brand, you do your vision board, and it can just be writing it out too, like putting all of these, descriptives together, it ignites ideas. It ignites like a plan. And so once you figure out your vision board, your step 3 is find your team. And we're not talking like major label team. This is like, I've got my friend who I grew up with who's really good at photography, and maybe they can help me. Or I know somebody online who's doing a great job at TikTok, maybe they can help me cut some clips up. It's also like looking around and putting your business hat on people who, especially, we have with LinkedIn, people who you want to feel like you're building an alliance with, who really understand your vision. Other artists too. I did a workshop at BIP, and in the room, there was an artist, and then there was somebody who was really great at graphic design. And I'm like, you should connect. You should connect and see if you can work together. So there's people all around you. You find your community of people. And then you create art and content. So for Paramore, what we did is, this is an example of executing a vision board. So do you see the album cover? Feeling too close, feeling observed, right? It's like this feeling of uncomfortableness that they wanted to relay. So if you skip these steps, you're skipping the message. You're diluting the message, right? So I think the album cover represented that. These are examples of press photos. And again, Yes is Paramore. Yes, this is a big band. It's same process for a small band. Same process for your own personal one. So these images were nostalgic, analog, feeling distant, right? First of all, Spotify and Apple didn't love these because they wanted full faces, They wanted the full experience. They want a generic press shot, but Paramore could get away with more. So this is how we represented that feeling of what they're trying to relay as a brand through the music side. Another one is Kelly Clarkson, very different. So here's an example of how we created content in building the brand or continuing the brand for Kelly. So we had this Christmas album, When Christmas Comes Around, and I had to come up with all the content and work with her. And so at the end of the day, we made a couple of things that were really fun and fit the fans. Again, know your brand and know your fan, right? So her fans, were busy. They're a lot of times they're moms, they're career women or men. And so, but they loved, the warmth of home, being at home. This is coming out of the pandemic as well. Kelly loved Christmas. And so we actually created this full album visualizer. But what it is she loves red wine. So we had this red wine glass that kept emptying throughout the whole visualizer, and then it'd fill up, and then it'd empty again. It was very subtle. And then the classic, the album was important to her. She loves vinyl. She's a big vocalist. We had a roaring fireplace. And you have a full album visualizer on YouTube that represents Kelly and who her fan base is. We also made up some custom items for Christmas D2C. We did a custom cup. We had her autograph on it. So you just, again, when you know your brand, you go back to that. Kelly is a big fan of red wine. She loves all these items, and so is her fan base. So you go back to the beginning of who they are, who the fan base is, and what energy you're trying to execute. And you can come up with a lot of fun things. I mean, I think, that's the point, that at the end of the day, you have to have fun because people are going to feel your energy, right? Another thing we did with Kelly Clarkson is we did a whole series called A Minute in a Glass of Wine, which was one of her songs that she had it as kind of a B-side. And she had a whole series of Kelly's going to sit there with a glass of wine and have a minute, and she did answer as many questions as she can in 60 seconds. We did a whole content shoot with that. So, but again, it's not that complicated. When you get overwhelmed with content, you go back to the beginning, know the brand, know who you're reaching, you have your board, and then you come up with a series of things that you can feed all of the world that you need to feed, but still stay on brand. Step 4. One of the things that I think, one of the biggest things right now is building a community. I'm sure you guys have spoken about that in class. It's not about selling a product or a song. It's about creating a universe, a community of people that you feel like is like-minded. And so I think the first step to do if you're unsure is figure out who your lookalike audience is. I'm sure you've heard that in your marketing classes. And I'm also teaching marketing, a marketing class, and taking this crazy wild world and putting it into this formula. So when we hear these terms like a lookalike audience or SWAT team, there's real world examples of like, yes, you don't have to start from scratch. If you were a new artist and you were going to perform, who would it be with? And don't say it's Drake. Like, who is the person that's going to be playing at the Paradise or MGM? Like, go to that level. What's that audience? What do they behave like? What do they look at? Like, do they blogs that they're on? What brands do they like? You get into that world if that's the audience that you want to be embraced by. Same with a brand, right? What other brands are they following? What publications are they looking at? What artists do they like? So I think getting a head start with a lookalike audience will really be helpful for you to get the confidence to get yourself going. And also, I think with the community building, it's not thinking of like a big number. It's thinking really small. It's like a Bumble app, the dating Bumble app. There's an amazing masterclass with her, and she said, I just kept thinking of neighborhoods versus the country. It's like, let's talk about this neighborhood. How can we connect with this area of this world? So don't worry about the big numbers right now. Think about like quality over quantity every single step of the way. And that is how you're going to start with building your community. So I think what the big part is like, don't think about serving fans content, make them part of the journey. If you see artists doing that, is like making you feel like, hey, I've recorded these 20 songs. Which songs do you think I should put out first? What do you think I should be doing for my video? What do you like about these photos? Like, they're making you feel like you're a part of the journey. And so I think paying attention to how you are feeling as a community member in whichever world that you follow, an artist, this is where you're putting the business hat on, right? You're going from passive to be part of the journey to actually paying attention and thinking about, like, what are they doing? Is it working, right? Is it working? Do I like what they're doing? Who's following? Or maybe I like another style. So there's a great newsletter from this guy, Rob Abloh, and it's called Where Music's Going. So I highly recommend following that. And so he basically takes all these statistics and all these new numbers and all the data and everything and makes them really consumable and just be like, okay, this is what's happening. This is what's happening on Spotify right now. This is what's happening to fan clubs right now. And I really loved this one because what we're focused on right now is the super fan. So again, don't worry about numbers because we all know those numbers are a lot of them are shallow, right? They don't really mean that they're engaged fans. But Rob pointed out that it's about deep interactions. So when you're building a brand on social media or your personal brand, or you're like, okay, I need to get my first job in the next year or two, or first launching my career, thinking about the deeper interactions that you have with people around you, with whether it's professors or business people, like thinking about how to go a little bit deeper than just on the surface is really important. Same thing with building a fan base, right? So ultimately, what these fans building this real community is like fan clubs. Email subscribers, ticket sales, VIP levels, you see those too, right? Vinyl sales, collectors, community members, that is the depth of what you're seeking. You're seeking people to sign up for your email list. Even if you've got 20 people to start, that's great. Now, how do you get a little bit more and a little bit more? So you're seeking deeper interactions. And I see this a lot. I saw this a lot on the music side. It's like, we need something for Instagram. We need something for Shorts. We need something for TikTok. What are you doing for TikTok? What have you done today for TikTok? What are you doing tomorrow for TikTok? But if it's not good content and you're not really sharing a good message and connecting, then it's just numbers. You're just checking it off a list and it's not really making an impact, right? More is not always better. Most of the time it's not. So I think this is something to think about because as he pointed out, 1.9% of fans generate 42% of the income. 42%. From the smallest amount of fans. Anybody know Fred again? Okay. Again, doesn't matter if you like him or not, this is what he's doing. So Fred again has been an incredible case study from day one. He's prioritized his interactions with his fans. And this is one of the reasons and great case study for people across businesses to focus on. So he's prioritized real-time personal interactions with his fans. He's created Discord and Reddit communities, exclusive WhatsApp chats, and one-to-one direct messaging with his fans. So it's like the message is show fans they're seen, show them they're valued. And if you think of that as a fan, like ponder that for a minute. Like, do you feel like you're being seen? Do you feel like you're being part of a community? And if you feel like you are and you feel like you're valued, then what is it that makes you feel that way, right? Because that's something that you're going to want to emulate. I think that with Fred again, what is insane is that he has such an intense relationship and close connection with his community. He's actually been able to put up arena-size shows. So that's like 18, 20,000 plus shows within 3 days' notice with no marketing money. Like, saves a lot of money. When you have this interaction, you don't need to spend as much money on advertising, right? You spend the money on content. You spend the money on like really connecting. Not all artists are great at connecting, right? They're just great artists. So then you have the team to make sure that their art in the way that's authentic is getting out there. And you can connect with them because you love the music. That may be enough. And that's fine, right? But you want to get a little bit deeper when you can. Have fun. Sometimes I forget it's supposed to be fun. It is. Like when you have fun, they feel the energy. One thing we did with Paramore that I thought was a lot of fun is, you know, we did two things specifically that I'm showing here. So here's an example. The band has another song coming out before the album. They love their fans, right? They can't be with their fans all the time. That's not realistic. So, but how do you show the fans that they're appreciated? They had a Beacon Theater show that was a small underplay. And I think it was like November before their album came out. It was their second song that was about to come out. All the fans were at the Beacon Theater waiting to get in, the ones lucky enough to get in. And all of a sudden they get an airdrop from Paramore. Like, oh, hey, here's a new song. Like, what? This is the beauty of social media, right? You could able to geo-target it right to the Beacon Theater location. And everyone's getting an airdrop of new music while they're in the theater. That feels good. And guess what? Everyone talked about it. So then you're getting press pickup. Right? It's all authentic. You're not paying for it. You're getting editorial. So that was one example. And you see like, you know, everyone's freaking out. All the news, we have a ton. Paramore gets a ton of press pickup anyway. Another fun example was before their release. So like, how do we connect with fans, make them feel like they are appreciated and give the type of care that Paramore wishes they could do to all of their fan base before the album? And so we created care packages. All of them were curated by the band. Like, okay, what do you want? We've got 20 care packages. Put items in there that you feel like represent like whatever your interests are. Your three main band members, like they all put in their favorite items. Haley can put in like her hair dye. She can do a bunch of variety of things and a little note. And these were delivered to the top fans. And we found them you can find them through merch sales, through ticket sales. It's not that difficult, right? All of a sudden they get a care package from Paramore. Did the band have to do anything more? They didn't have to go anywhere, right? You don't have to like put yourself out there and make it uncomfortable, but they could still feel like they cared about them. They felt heard and seen. And then guess what? It got a lot of press pickup, right? That's free. So those are some of the examples of like, you can have a lot of fun with digital marketing. Remember, people didn't have this option before. It was always like, there was always like a kind of a barrier between the artists and their fans, and it was through these platforms and journalists. Now it's direct. Another example is just thinking locally and globally. Everything you do online is global. So there's artists like, Gail, the ABCDEFU, her first song was taking off in South Korea. It's like, what? Okay, this is great. Like, we'll just keep adding to this. And Ava Max was first out of Stockholm. So you gotta look at globally, where is somebody connecting to your music? And so always think wider than your area, but at the same time, do something locally and connect locally. So here's a couple examples of this. Like for Paramore, one of the things we're trying to accomplish is like, okay, they want to get their music out to fans first. Once it's up on on DSPs, on Spotify and Apple, it's for everybody. You're not really catering to the fans and trying to have them hear it first. It's a little trickier as a bigger artist. And they also want to give back to independent record stores. They want to show that they're like authentic artists. They're building an album campaign. At the end of the day, they're still indie at heart. So how do we do all these things? So we had early global release events at independent record stores around the world, where they went there and they had these events where fans got together, right? Community, right? Fans are getting together, they're celebrating. Paramore's like, we're not gonna be precious with our music, we're gonna give it to you early. So that was great because it also was really feel good for the indie record stores. It was able to give back in a world where they're often forgotten after a developing artist phase. Another example that we had a lot of fun with was MGMT. We did these like, they were like advanced listening captures where we gave the coordinates. So like Monday, 6 p.m., coordinates of a location. Fans didn't know what was going on. They just started running there, started showing up. And they were fine to be held captive in a van as it drove around Manhattan and Brooklyn listening to the new music, and they all had their headphones on. And it was just acting locally and giving back while you can feed it globally is a great way to make a connection. And also like that will have, again, press pickup, right? And people are like, did you see what you missed? Did you hear about this? And it will feel like you're gaining a community. What's interesting is some of these artists that I worked with at the very beginning, I see them now, so it's 20 years later, to see them and have these fans that have followed them for that long, and even seeing some of these iconic artists that have, had their fan base for almost 30 years. I saw the Pixies recently, watching the people in the audience. Like this was the soundtrack of their life, right? When they were in your age or in high school or college, these artists were the soundtrack of these big moments in your life, mostly the most influential moments in your life. So building this community and having this lifelong fan keeps them having a career, right? It's like there's plenty of artists that can sell and stream music, but you don't want to go see a show. You don't really want to buy a shirt. You want to do much more, right? So there's a big difference. So think globally and locally when you're branding. At the end of the day, building a community, there's no one formula, but there's lessons to be learned. So create direct fan relationships, embrace authenticity, put community first. Reward your fans, encourage participation, create magical moments, make fans a main character, and bring people together. It's the most important skill you can learn. And actually, I would say it's the best skill that you can offer a company. When you're looking for a job, it's being exactly who you are and having your world being social media, understanding how you live in a community, what truly works, and what doesn't. Being at the table with creative, we see creative gone bad so many times because the audience is not at the table when they're creating it. So you have a lot to offer any company. Just remember your own superpower. Measuring fandom, seeking quality over quantity. So you want to turn listeners into fans and fans into super fans and create a tribe, okay? Don't be obsessed with numbers. They're often hollow, okay? There's like plenty of numbers that won't matter. There's plenty of examples of artists that had a song take off and things happen all over TikTok and have a huge trend. Nobody was waiting for them for their next song. They thought they had a community. They did not. They had a song. It's a big difference. At the end of the day, my closing words and advice is be persistent, be flexible, be creative, be honest, be energetic, and have fun. And it takes time. It is a marathon, definitely not a sprint. Thank you. I would love to hear from anybody with any questions. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, Skylar.
So I know a lot of artists like sometimes have like scandals or stuff that go wrong. Like, how would you deal with that from a marketing perspective?
Okay. There's been a lot of scandals. I think you just kind of have to go a little quieter. And for the marketer, I think you step back. I think you have to step back unless you have a real message, and then you leave it up to having there's actually crisis publicists, like crisis management publicity, and they help work with the artist on figuring out the best solution. I do think like the challenge, if there's a lot of challenges with being artists right now, it's all up to them. You don't want to hear it from the record label. You don't want to hear it from a publicist. You want to hear it from the artist. They have to kind of be everything. So it's good news, bad news, but most likely they're going to have to be direct, right? Like, what do you want? You want them to be direct. You want them to be honest. You want them to take ownership if they did something wrong. And then hopefully it moves on. What feels like it's going to destroy an artist, a lot of times it does not. People forget and they move on, because if they create a great song or a great album, people forget. Any other questions? Yes?
I guess I'll use this microphone.
Yeah.
I would love to hear a little bit more, I'm sure everyone would hear a little bit more about your own personal career trajectory, like what you took for a job out of school and how you grew into the role that you have today.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I didn't know a casual way to say that I did not get accepted at UNH. I probably wouldn't have accepted me either, to be fair, at that time. I was not an academic, girl at all. I was social. So I think what happened with me is I figured out I was living my job. Like, I honestly just needed to get paid for it. So what happened, I was at Emerson College, which, by the way, I went to community college. And then I waitressed my way into paid for community college and went to Keene State College, and then realized I wanted marketing, which was really exciting. And I begged my way into Emerson College. They let me come in I was under probation, but I graduated in honors. I know how to work hard. That's it. I grew up with a single mom. Like, we know how to work hard and you be persistent. And at the end of the day, you are being interviewed by your character. Like, you can learn the skill. People need to want to work with you, right? Like, you may be really great at digital marketing. You have to be amazing. If you don't have a personality and character that is, that people can count on, you show up, you look for solutions, not problems. Like, at the end of the day, you have to be a team person that are contributing to somebody else. So after Emerson, I needed an internship. Again, I did not want the music internship because music business, because my brother lived a disgusting lifestyle. But I needed one, and so I got one at Sony Music last minute out of Lexington. It was distribution. And I just could not believe you could have a job working with artists and marketing artists. Like, I just became obsessed. I did all of my boss's marketing plans. I didn't realize that was so inappropriate, but I did. And I was at all the shows, and I just loved it. You just love it. And so I just worked my way up, and I ran the Northeast. Everything was developing artists. It was independent record stores. It was brand new artists. It was college radio, college campuses, running college, and then worked my way to a product manager at Columbia Records, which is like the center of the wheel. And I worked with MGMT before they even made Oracular Spectacular. If you don't know the band, look it up. And went into the rise and fall, the rise of their first album, the fall of the second album. Talk about community. This community was so upset with the second album not being what they thought it should be. It was like they were personally offended by it. And I was like, good news. You have people who are personally offended by your second album. That takes a lot of effort to be personally offended. There's plenty of artists you wouldn't care much about. So I just kept working, and I was really close with my artists. It was really serious about building their brand, and I was a great partner for them, and I challenged them, and I went through the craziness of the industry, and it is wild. It's getting better, and then decided to stop in the pandemic and not live in New York City. So I'm back in New Hampshire, and I'm trying to help people navigate this crazy world. Thank you for the question. Anyone else? Yeah.
In this music industry, when you're working with an artist, trying to build a brand for them, what's the best way to reach a consensus in terms of, maybe getting paid as a marketer? Do you work on commission basis, or how best can you reach terms with an artist?
I think it depends. You're talking about how do you work with an artist and what's a fair compensation for it? I don't think I was compensated until my 30s. I think it's really hard because you're dependent on their art. You're dependent on their behavior. So I would suggest it depends financially what you can do. Either you take a leap of faith, or you get a retainer and make it minimal, make it like, hey, but you have to control your time. A lot of time it's just all an investment. It's kind of like gambling. So, but at the same time, there's plenty of people who've worked with artists that as much as they rose, they also rose with them, or the artist moved on and found somebody else that had more experience. But you control your, you and your relationships. Artists can help you get in the door, I worked with Patti Smith, and it was iconic. She opened the door for me in different worlds I even would think of. So that helps me too. I benefited from being associated with these artists, right? So it's as long as you go through it as what do you want out of it too. If you're going to connect with a local publication or an influencer or somebody, make sure you're building you as you're building this artist too. So when he or they leave, you're fine. Does that help? The loyalty thing is not always there.